I've got 10 World War II air combat movies, some legends, some you've probably never sat through, and I'm ranking them right now. You'll see John Wayne trying to play a Medal of Honor pilot, dogfights filmed with actual Spitfires, and some CGI that actually looks good. We take for granted right now the role that bombing raids had in World War II. This film is an excellent education on how bombing rose through the political fights to become the force it was. Clark Gable plays General Casey, who's running the American Air Force's daylight bombing campaign. He keeps clashing with his superiors because he's taking heavy losses over and over. The whole setup is a catch-22. If they go ahead with these dangerous missions and lose a ton of planes, they risk losing public and political support. But if they don't take the risk, they give up the initiative to the Germans. And they could use that opening to get ahead on tech and end up costing the Allies even more. This is based on a play, and you can feel it. Really sharp dialogue, great characters, and a lot of intelligence behind it. This is one of the few films that really digs into what it was like for these guys, knowing every time they went out, a percentage of their squad wasn't coming back. And if the target was more valuable, those odds got even worse. Command decision kind of faded away over the years, but it's absolutely worth tracking down. The Flying Leathernecks is a classic 1950s studio war film, and you can feel all the politics behind it. Nicholas Ray directed it for Howard Hughes at RKO, mostly to show his loyalty during the Red Scare. Ray didn't even agree with the politics of the script, and there's a rumor he actually pushed Robert Ryan to overact on purpose. The story is straightforward. John Wayne plays Major Daniel Kirby, leading a squadron of Marine Wildcat pilots during the Battle of Guadalcanal. It's stiff, really by the numbers, and full of that jingoistic kind of vibe these movies get. Most of the air combat is just stock footage. There's actually a real-life story behind Wayne's character. He's based on Captain John Smith, a Medal of Honor winner and a top Marine ace on Guadalcanal. Smith was a legit war hero. 19 confirmed kills, led the Cactus Air Force, promoted to lieutenant colonel. Wayne even kind of looks like him. But in the end, Flying Leathernecks is exactly the kind of war film people think of when they picture old Hollywood propaganda. Red Tails showed up 17 years after HBO's The Tuskegee Airmen and tried to tell the same story, just with way more focus on the action. Where the HBO film was all about dramatic performances but totally fumbled the action scenes, Red Tails basically flips that. The aerial sequences here are actually great, some of the best you'll see in a movie about World War II. If you could somehow merge the character work from the 90s film with the dogfights from this one, you'd have a classic. But instead, what you get in Red Tails is a bunch of cool plane battles sandwiched between flat characters and standard plot conflicts. George Lucas executive produced this one and even directed some of the additional material himself. They brought in Dr. Daniel Hallman, who's one of the top experts on the Tuskegee Airmen, as a technical advisor. He praised the movie's spirit but didn't hold back on the accuracy. The movie is generally good, but there are many historical inaccuracies. He pointed out a couple of big ones. There's a scene where the Tuskegee Airmen supposedly destroy a German destroyer by strafing it. That never happened. The film also claims they were the only fighter escort group on a major Berlin mission, but in reality there were 5 groups on that mission. Still, if you just want to see some great dogfights, this movie delivers. Memphis Belle is one of those Hollywood takes on a true story. It follows a young B-17 bomber crew on their last and most dangerous mission. The target's heavily defended, and the movie really wants you to feel the tension. This is basically a fictionalized version of the real-life Memphis Belle's 25th and final bombing run over Germany. The film is based on a documentary by William Wyler, and it gets a lot of credit for how it handles the aerial combat. Military historian James Rogers praised it for its authenticity in those scenes and for showing what it's actually like to come home from war. For about 20 minutes, you get some genuinely great stuff. The crew banter, everyone playing their role, the way the tension builds as they get closer to the target. There's one moment where another bomber in their group gets taken out by a fighter, and you actually feel it with the crew. For that part alone, it's worth watching. The problem is, outside those scenes, the film just piles on the melodrama. Every possible thing that could go wrong does. It gets to a point where you can practically see the screenwriter trying to ratchet up the tension. There's a decent movie here, but you have to dig through a lot of Hollywood sensationalism to get to it. At number 6, I've got this classic British war film. The island of Malta is right in the middle of the Mediterranean, strategic spot, and that meant it was a huge target during the war. The movie's focused on the Axis siege of Malta. Alec Guinness playing a reconnaissance pilot and Jack Hawkins as the island's commander. The story plays out a bit like a microcosm of the main island of Britain early in the war, dependent on aerial fighters to engage the constant Axis air raids and dependent on naval convoys to bring fresh supplies, or else they will be entirely cut off. The aerial sequences here get the job done, although it's mostly models and a bit of stock footage mixed in. There's a subplot with a Maltese family and Guinness's character, but the real focus is the military story, and that's where the film works best. It doesn't quite hit the level of The Cruel Sea or The Desert Rats from the same year, but it's a solid piece of that golden era of British war films. If you like old-school war movies, this is a good one to track down. This is another British war movie, this time a fictional story. The whole squadron is tasked with taking out a Nazi rocket fuel site hidden in a Norwegian fjord. The idea is, if the site survives, the Nazis will be able to fuel up their V-2 rockets and threaten the D-Day landings. Cliff Robertson leads the squadron. He's burned out but determined. They fly de Havilland Mosquitoes through the mountains, which gives you some great visuals. The second act throws in some complications. A Norwegian resistance member gets captured by the SS, and the Brits decide they have to bomb the Gestapo headquarters to stop him from talking and save the mission. It's a good twist, way more interesting than the usual filler you get in the middle of these movies. The final bombing run is a mix of miniatures, some real flying, and cockpit sets. The effects are a little dated and there are some repeated shots, but the editing pulls it together for a pretty solid climax. It's not a masterpiece, but it's a solid entry in the British war movie lineup. At number 4, I've got The Dam Busters. This is a British film about the invention and first use of what they called bouncing bombs. The idea was to drop these things from airplanes, skip them across water, and use them to blow up German dams. It's one of those movies that takes you through the whole process. The inventor coming up with the idea, all the testing and failed experiments, and finally convincing the higher-ups to actually try it. You see them putting the right crew together and training pilots to pull off something nobody's done before. The big payoff is the bombing run on the dams. The action's a bit dated now, but for its time it was a huge influence, especially on other war movies. I do wish it spent a little more time on what those missions actually meant and the real consequences. But as a look at how technology moves through the chain of command and changes the course of war, The Dam Busters gets it right. Roland Emmerich is the guy behind Independence Day and The Patriot, so you already know he's all about spectacle. The first two-thirds set the stage, everything leading up to Pearl Harbor and what led to Midway on both sides. You get a lot on the mindset of Japanese officials, their planning, and the lead-up to the big battle. Where it slips is with the American characters. The drama is just heavy-handed and not written all that well, so those sections drag the movie down. But once you get past the weak drama and all the cheesy elements, you get one of the best-looking war action sequences ever put on film. The last third is all about the air and naval action. Torpedo bombers spotting the Japanese fleet, failing on the first try, then the U.S. dive bomber squads coming in for the kill. These bombing runs are the highlight, shot in a way that actually brings out the tension and scale. You get these massive visuals, ships everywhere, planes all over the sky, anti-aircraft fire lighting up the frame. If you want to see real aerial action, this is the movie you go for. It's still probably the best film about what it was actually like to fly and fight as a pilot. There's no CGI here, just real planes, actual flying, and a lot of effort to get the historical details right. It's in the same category as those old epic war movies like The Longest Day and Battle of the Bulge, just focused on the skies. The story covers those months in 1940 when Germany's Luftwaffe tried to crush Britain from the air, basically win air superiority so they could invade. You get both sides, commanders laying out their strategy, then you're thrown right into wave after wave of dogfights. The filmmakers use tons of real airfields and physical aircraft. It's a little dated since this is pre-Vietnam cinema, before movies got more violent, before Saving Private Ryan set the gritty standard. But it's a huge, handsomely produced recreation. And there's a touching subplot about air raid shelters that has stuck with me. Most movies about aerial combat go for the romance of fighter planes, but this one's about bombers and the reality is a lot darker. For bomber crews, every mission is a roll of the dice. The deeper you go into Germany, the more likely you don't come back. This is a movie about the math and the psychology of flying into danger again and again. The story follows an American bomber unit in England, dealing with heavy losses and collapsing morale. Gregory Peck comes in as the new commander, and he's determined to push them into becoming the best bomber unit in the Air Force. But the question is always, at what cost? How hard can you push people before they break? There's none of that tough guy leader stuff you get with John Wayne movies. This one digs into the real mental toll, and it's still used in military schools today to talk about leadership. If you've seen Catch-22, imagine that but serious, not satirical, and you'll get the idea. Just a straight-up classic.